The sheriff stood inside the HOA office with an open safe at his feet, bundles of cash on the floor, and boxes of traffic violations stacked against the wall. Karen Vance insisted every dollar had been collected to protect the community. The sheriff lifted one citation, studied the seal printed across the top, and set it down. An HOA is not a traffic court. Ethan Walker said nothing. Outside, deputies were tagging a speed camera as evidence. Nearly $600,000 had been collected. Nobody yet knew where all of it went or why. 9 days earlier, Ethan Walker had no reason to think the gravel lane running from County Route 18 to his ranch would become the center of anything. It had been there longer than the subdivision, across the tree line, and every survey he owned called it the same thing. Walker Road, private access, parcel 44B. A handful of neighboring homeowners held easement rights over the first quarter mile, but the ground, the ditch lines, and the maintenance obligation belonged to Ethan. That Tuesday morning, he drove out before sunrise to check a fence crew coming in after breakfast. Halfway to the county road, he slowed. 2 steel poles stood beside the lane where there had been nothing the night before. Each carried a black camera housing pointed toward traffic. A small solar panel sat above one unit. Below the other was a rectangular box with a cellular antenna. 50 yards farther down, a fresh white sign read Speed Limit 15, Pato N for CD. Ethan stopped his pickup on the shoulder and looked at the sign for several seconds. He did not pull it down. He did not touch the cameras. Instead, he took out his phone and photographed everything from the road surface to the tops of the poles. He captured the mounting bolts, the serial numbers, the utility box, the trench where a cable had been buried, and the bright orange survey paint sprayed near the ditch. Then he walked back toward his truck and took a wider photograph showing the old boundary marker behind the nearest camera. That marker mattered. His father had shown it to him when Ethan was 16, long before the gated homes beyond the pines had become a development called Cedar Ridge Estates. Ethan had replaced the marker after a county survey 5 years earlier, and he knew exactly where his property began. Both cameras were inside it. A white plumbing van turned off the county road while Ethan was still standing there. The driver lifted 2 fingers in greeting and rolled past at what Ethan guessed was 25 miles per hour. A flash fired behind the van. Ethan turned. The second camera flashed as well. That changed the question. Security cameras watched property. These units were measuring movement. He photographed the van disappearing around the bend, then the 2 camera housings again. On the side of the control box, almost hidden beneath the mounting bracket, was a decal from a company called Roadsure Municipal Systems. Municipal. Ethan stared at the word. His road was not municipal. If you enjoy stories where ordinary people stay calm long enough for the paperwork to expose what power was trying to hide, subscribe and stay with this one. Because what looked like 2 cameras beside a quiet country road was about to open a much larger ledger. At 8:15, Ethan called the Cedar Ridge HOA office. The receptionist told him President Karen Vance was unavailable and that questions about the Traffic Safety Initiative should be submitted by email. Traffic Safety Initiative. Ethan wrote the phrase down. Then he sent one short message asking who had authorized equipment to be installed on parcel 44B, who owned the equipment, and under what legal authority the HOA had placed a photo-enforced speed limit on private land. No answer came that morning. By noon, 3 more vehicles had triggered the flash. Ethan watched each one from his pasture gate. The cameras never blinked at pedestrians, tractors, or cattle trailers moving slowly. They reacted only when a vehicle crossed an invisible point in the road. Someone had not merely put cameras on Ethan Walker's property. Someone had built a system there. And that system was already recording people who never agreed. The first letter reached Ethan before Karen ever answered his email. It came through a man named Luis Ortega, a delivery driver who had been bringing feed supplements and hardware to the ranch for nearly 3 years. Luis arrived Friday afternoon holding a white envelope instead of a clipboard. "You know anything about this?" he asked. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper. Across the top in dark blue letters were the words Cedar Ridge Traffic Enforcement Division. Beneath them sat a photograph of Luis's van, his license plate enlarged in a separate box, the date, the exact time, and a recorded speed of 27 miles per hour in a 15-mile-per-hour zone. Amount due, $125. The notice assigned a citation number and gave him 14 days to pay. After that, a $75 administrative surcharge would be added. At 30 days, the account could be referred for collection action. Luis had already paid it. "I thought it was from the county," he said. "Look at it." Ethan did. That was exactly the problem. The paper looked official enough to discourage questions. There was a shield-shaped emblem near the header. A barcode appeared beside the citation number. The lower section included payment instructions, a dispute deadline, and a warning printed in bold type. But when Ethan read it slowly, the details that should have been there were missing. No police department, no municipal court, no county court, no state statute, no officer name, no badge number, no instructions for requesting a court hearing. The payment address went to a post office box managed by the HOA. Ethan made a copy. That afternoon, he drove to the camera site and found Karen Vance waiting beside a black SUV. She wore a cream jacket, held a tablet against her chest, and spoke before he had even closed his truck door. "I assume you got my office's explanation. I got a citation somebody sent to my delivery driver." Karen's expression did not change. "Then you understand why the program was necessary. Residents have complained about speeding for months. We have seniors walking those roads. We have families. We have a responsibility to protect them." Ethan held up the copy. "Who gave the HOA authority to issue traffic citations?" Karen smiled as though he had asked something already settled. "The board approved enforcement." "That wasn't my question. The road serves our community. It crosses my land. We have access rights. Access isn't ownership." Karen lowered the tablet. "Ethan, nobody is trying to take your road. We are trying to make it safer." He looked past her at the camera. "Then why does your notice look like a government ticket?" For the first time, Karen paused, only for a second. Then she said the HOA's legal counsel had reviewed the language and that every recipient had a dispute process available. "Where?" "It's explained online." "Where does it say this is an HOA assessment instead of a traffic citation?" Karen's jaw tightened. "You are focusing on wording instead of safety." Ethan glanced again at the letter. "No, I'm focusing on authority." Karen turned toward her SUV. Before getting inside, she told him removing or damaging the cameras could expose him to liability for interfering with the community safety system. Ethan did not answer. He went home and placed Luis's notice beside his deed, his survey, and the photographs from Tuesday morning. The page was designed to make a person believe refusal carried legal consequences, yet nothing on it identified a government agency with the power to impose them. That meant the most important question was no longer whether the cameras belonged there. It was why Karen needed people to believe the paper was something it was not. Ethan wondered how many other drivers had paid without questioning a word printed on that page. By Saturday morning, Ethan had 3 documents spread across his kitchen table: the warranty deed for Parcel 44B, the most recent county plat, and the easement agreement recorded when Cedar Ridge Estates was built. The language was not complicated. Walker Road belonged to Ethan. The HOA held a non-exclusive access easement over a defined portion of it, so residents in 12 homes could reach the county route. The agreement gave those owners the right to pass over the road. It did not transfer title. It did not authorize the HOA to install permanent equipment. It did not give anyone the right to regulate speed, issue penalties, collect money, or represent the road as public. A clerk pulled the recorded plat and enlarged the relevant page. Ethan placed one of his photographs beside it. The nearest camera sat roughly 19 feet inside his parcel boundary. The second was farther in. The clerk pointed at the easement line. "That's access," she said, "not ownership." Ethan nodded. He asked whether any newer instrument had modified the easement. There was none. He asked whether Cedar Ridge HOA had recorded a traffic control agreement with the county. None. He asked whether the road had ever been accepted into the county road system. It had not. By noon, Ethan had certified copies in a manila folder and one fewer uncertainty. The argument could no longer be reduced to Karen saying the road served Cedar Ridge while Ethan said it was his. The public record answered that question. What it did not answer was how RoadSure Municipal Systems had agreed to install equipment there. Ethan called the company. At first, customer service would confirm only that Cedar Ridge HOA was a client. Ethan asked for the department handling property authorizations. After 2 transfers, a contract administrator named Rebecca Shaw requested the installation address. Ethan gave her the parcel number instead. There was a long pause. "That is not how the location is listed in our system," she said. "Cedar Ridge Community Access Road." "Does the file identify a private owner?" Another pause. "I can't discuss the contract with a non-client. I am the landowner." Rebecca asked him to email proof. 20 minutes after Ethan sent the certified deed and plat, her tone changed. She would not provide the full agreement without authorization, but she confirmed the HOA had submitted a site certification, representing that it possessed authority to place the devices at the listed location. Ethan asked who signed it. Rebecca would only say it had been submitted through the HOA account. That afternoon, Karen finally replied to Ethan's original email. Her message was 4 paragraphs long. It repeated the phrases traffic safety, community access, resident protection, and board authorization. It did not cite a statute, deed provision, easement clause, county approval, or court order. At the bottom was a PDF labeled Roadsure Service Summary. Ethan opened it. The summary listed 2 cameras: automated plate capture, speed detection, notice processing, payment portal administration, and data storage. Then he reached the compensation section. The HOA had paid a modest setup fee. Roadsure's ongoing service cost was partially tied to collected citations. The phrase appeared in a single line: citation revenue sharing applies according to Schedule B. Ethan read it twice. If those words meant what they appeared to mean, the cameras were not simply costing the HOA money. They were producing it. And the company operating them might be paid more when more drivers paid. Ethan printed the page and added it to the growing folder. The question had shifted again. Someone had described his privately owned road as a community access road. Someone had certified authority they did not appear to possess. And now a contract suggested that every flash could be connected to revenue. The camera outside had stopped looking like a safety device. It was beginning to look like a cash register. Ethan spent the next morning learning everything he could about Roadsure municipal systems, without assuming the contract itself proved anything illegal. The company sold traffic management equipment to towns, private campuses, gated communities, and commercial properties. Some clients used the cameras only to collect data. Others used them to enforce parking rules or private access policies. None of that, by itself, answered what Cedar Ridge had done. What mattered was the agreement. Rebecca Shaw eventually sent Ethan a redacted copy after Roadsure's legal department reviewed his deed. Schedule B was still partially blocked, but enough remained visible to show the structure. Cedar Ridge had paid a small installation fee for the 2 cameras. Roadsure handled image processing, plate recognition, mailing, online payments, and dispute intake. In return, the company received a processing fee from each paid notice, plus a percentage once monthly collections passed a threshold. The more money the program collected, the better the economics became for both sides. Ethan laid the service summary beside Luis Ortega's $125 notice. The first penalty was $75 for a lower speed violation. Higher readings triggered $125 or $175. A late payment added another $75. A second notice added an administrative processing charge. Accounts that remained unpaid could be transferred to outside collection. Their legal basis was. Karen had described the cameras as a safety initiative, but a financial report attached to the HOA's quarterly packet used a different word. Ethan found it on page 17 beneath clubhouse rentals and architectural review fees. Revenue. The line read Automated Road Safety Revenue. For the last quarter alone, it showed $18,450. Ethan looked again at the posted speed limit, 15 miles per hour. Walker Road was straight through that section, bordered by pasture on one side and a drainage strip on the other. There were no houses within several hundred yards of the cameras, no school crossing, no playground, no blind intersection. That did not prove the limit had been chosen to maximize tickets. Ethan refused to make a claim he could not support. He simply wrote down the facts. The road had previously carried a privately posted 25-mile-per-hour advisory sign near the easement entrance. The HOA replaced it with 15. Roadsure's compensation increased when collections increased. The HOA booked the money as revenue, and Karen still had not identified the legal authority behind the notices. Ethan requested copies of the board minutes approving the program. Karen answered within an hour. The documents were available only to association members. She wrote, and Ethan was not one. That response made sense in one narrow respect. His ranch sat outside Cedar Ridge, so he did not pay dues or vote in the association. But the cameras sat on his land. Ethan forwarded Karen's message to Rebecca and asked for the date of the original installation authorization. Rebecca called instead of emailing. "Mr. Walker," she said, "the active program is not recent. How old is it? I can't give you the full file yet. Was it operating before these 2 cameras were installed?" Silence. That is something you should probably discuss with the association. Karen had spoken as though the cameras were a new response to recent complaints. Roadsure's administrator had just implied the system existed earlier. He pulled Cedar Ridge's public-facing newsletters from an online archive and searched for the words speed, safety, camera, enforcement, and traffic. Nothing from the last few months. Then he searched older editions. A newsletter from nearly 3 years earlier contained one sentence beneath a section about neighborhood security. Automated access monitoring will begin this fall. No mention of tickets, no mention of fines, no mention of revenue. Ethan opened the next month, then the month after that. The phrase disappeared, but a new budget line appeared later that year. Road Safety Administration. The cameras beside his pasture were new. The program behind them was not. And if $18,000 could be collected in 1 quarter now, Ethan needed to know what 3 years of safety had actually produced. He started with the 12 homes holding easement rights over Walker Road. By the end of the first afternoon, 5 residents had found old notices in email folders or filing cabinets. By the following evening, 3 more had called him. The oldest was 76-year-old Margaret Bell, who lived alone near the back entrance of Cedar Ridge. She brought Ethan a grocery bag filled with envelopes. "I kept them because I keep everything," she said. There were 7 notices. The first was for $75. The next year she paid $125. 2 others included late fees because she had been visiting her sister when the letters arrived. Margaret said she never challenged any of them. "I thought if I didn't pay, they could do something to my license." Ethan looked at the warning language. Nothing explicitly said her driver's license would be suspended. Nothing explicitly said a court would issue a warrant. The notice did something more careful. It used phrases like further enforcement, formal collection, additional penalties, and legal remedies available under applicable authority. It let fear fill in the blanks. Another family, the Parkers, showed Ethan a $250 balance tied to a car registered in the father's name but driven by his college-age son. The original notice had been $125. By the time they discovered it, another processing charge had been added. A roofing contractor named Dale Fisher had a thicker file. "I stopped taking jobs back there," he told Ethan. "Every time one of my guys drove through, another envelope showed up." Dale had paid 4 notices himself and reimbursed employees for 3 more. "How many other contractors know about this?" Ethan asked. "Enough that people joke about Cedar Ridge being a toll road." That sentence stayed with him. Ethan copied every notice with permission and sorted them by date across his dining room table. The oldest was 34 months old. The layout had changed at least 4 times. Early versions carried the heading Community Road Safety Notice. Later ones became Automated Traffic Violation. The newest used Cedar Ridge Traffic Enforcement Division. The language had become more official as the program aged. So had the penalties. The first notices Ethan found were mostly $75. Later versions showed $125 and $175 tiers. A second letter added fees. Some included a printed box labeled "Caution Eligible." This was not a hastily invented response to a few complaints. It had evolved. Ethan began a simple handwritten ledger: recipient, date, amount, payment status, vehicle, and notice format. He was careful not to total anything beyond the documents in front of him. Even so, the stack grew fast. Margaret sat at the end of the table watching him arrange the papers. "I know $75 doesn't sound like much," she said. "It sounds like $75. For some people, that's groceries." Ethan nodded. That was the part the glossy language concealed. Most individual amounts were small enough that people paid rather than fight. A lawyer would cost more. A day in court would cost more. Even time spent figuring out whether the notice was real could feel more expensive than surrendering $75. The system did not need every driver to believe it completely. It only needed enough of them to decide resistance was not worth the trouble. The next morning, Margaret returned with 1 more envelope she had found in a desk drawer. It was older than the others and printed on different paper. At the top was a shield emblem Ethan had not seen before. Around the shield were the words Cedar Ridge Public Safety Authority. Below it appeared a line reading Official Civil Traffic Assessment. Ethan turned the page over. The return envelope was addressed to a payment center in the same county. But in the lower corner, nearly hidden in gray text, was a routing code. Ethan recognized the first digits. They matched the county sheriff's administrative numbering format used on public records. He photographed the envelope, the notice, and the routing code. Then he called the sheriff's office and asked to speak with someone who could verify a traffic citation number. Deputy Carla Mendez met Ethan in a small interview room at the sheriff's office that afternoon. She did not begin by asking what he thought Karen had done. She asked for the paper. Ethan placed Margaret's oldest notice on the table. Mendez read the citation number, opened the county traffic system, and typed it in. No result. She tried again without the prefix. Nothing. Then she searched by Margaret Bell's name, the date, and the license plate. Still nothing. Mendez called a records clerk and read the number aloud. The clerk checked archived entries. "No case," the voice on speaker said. Mendez looked at Ethan. "Was there ever a traffic stop? No. Officer contact? No. Court summons? No." She examined the emblem at the top of the page. Then she searched the county registry for Cedar Ridge Public Safety Authority. No such agency existed. The sheriff himself, Daniel Hart, joined them 15 minutes later. Hart was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and economical with words. He read the notice once, then asked Ethan to show him the newer versions. Ethan spread 4 examples across the table. Hart compared them in silence. "Who issued these?" he asked. "The HOA says the board approved them. That's not what I asked." Ethan almost smiled. It was the same question he had asked Karen. Hart pointed at the phrase Traffic Enforcement Division. An association can enforce covenants against its members if its governing documents allow it. That does not make it a police department. It can have rules on private property. That does not create state traffic citations. He tapped the shield logo. And nobody gets to borrow the appearance of government authority and assume that settles the question. Hart ordered a formal check. The results came back one by one. No matching county case numbers, no traffic stops, no court records, no certified officers associated with the notices, no citation data forwarded to the state motor vehicle system, no county contract delegating traffic enforcement to Cedar Ridge. The routing code on Margaret's envelope turned out to resemble the sheriff's administrative format but did not map to any actual sheriff file. Hart did not call Karen. He did not send deputies to remove the cameras. He did not announce a crime. Instead, he asked Ethan for every note it had collected, the deed, the easement, the roadshare service summary, and his photographs of the installation. Keep originals, Hart said. Give us copies. What about the cameras? Leave them exactly where they are. They're on my property. I understand. I could remove them. You could. I'm asking you not to. Ethan nodded. Hart wanted investigators to document the equipment while it was operating, identify who controlled it, preserve any transmitted data, and establish how each notice moved from image capture to payment. That meant the fastest emotional response was the worst practical choice. The cameras stayed. 2 deputies photographed them that evening. Their body cameras recorded the signs, serial numbers, boundary markers, and control boxes. A county survey technician later confirmed their location relative to Ethan's parcel. Karen arrived before the deputies finished. She stepped out of her SUV and demanded to know why law enforcement was interfering with a board-approved safety program. Hart remained beside the nearest pole. Who authorized you to issue these notices? He asked. Our legal counsel reviewed the entire system. What counsel? The association's attorney. Name. Karen hesitated, then gave it. Franklin Pierce, a lawyer in the county seat who had represented Cedar Ridge on property matters for years. Hart wrote the name down. Karen crossed her arms. You'll find everything is legal. Good, Hart said. Then verification should be easy. He gave no accusation, no threat, and no argument. That seemed to bother Karen more than anger would have. She returned to her SUV and called someone before she even closed the door. Hart watched her through the windshield. Then he looked at Ethan. Now we asked the lawyer what he actually approved. Until then, every camera flash, payment notice, and legal warning would be treated as evidence to trace, not as proof of what anyone intended or knew yet. Franklin Pierce did not sound surprised when Sheriff Hart called him. He sounded confused. Pierce asked for a copy of the notice carrying Cedar Ridge's Traffic Enforcement Division header. Hart emailed it while they were still on the phone. The lawyer went quiet. I did not draft this, he said. Hart asked whether he had approved the program. Pierce answered carefully. 2 years earlier, Cedar Ridge had asked him for advice about liability on private roads used by residents and delivery vehicles. He had written a memorandum explaining that the association could adopt certain internal safety policies on property it owned or controlled, subject to its governing documents and state law. Did you authorize automated traffic citations? No. Did you advise them they could operate as a traffic enforcement agency? No. Did you approve this language? No. Hart asked Pierce to send the original memorandum. It arrived 30 minutes later. The first 4 pages matched a copy Karen provided to the sheriff's office the next morning. Same date, same letterhead, same subject line, same signature block. But Karen's version had a 5th paragraph near the conclusion. That paragraph stated that the association could implement automated enforcement measures, assess civil traffic penalties, and pursue unpaid violations through collection procedures when necessary to protect community access roads. Pierce's original did not contain it. Hart put the 2 versions side by side. The extra paragraph was written in a style close enough to blend with the rest of the memorandum. It used the same font, margins, and spacing. Pierce's signature appeared below it because the new language had been inserted above the existing signature block. That is my signature, he said, pointing to the bottom of Karen's copy. But I did not sign that paragraph. Pierce provided his original document, email transmission records, and a PDF created the day he sent the opinion to Cedar Ridge. The HOA copy told a different story. Its metadata showed a later creation date. The modification timestamp fell nearly 3 months after Pierce delivered his memorandum. The author field on the altered file did not name Pierce. It showed a generic workstation account, Sear OA Edmund 2. A date had done more damage to Karen's explanation than an argument could have. When Hart confronted her with the discrepancy, Karen blamed a former administrative employee named Nicole Reeves. Nicole prepared board packets. Karen said. "If something was reformatted, I wouldn't know." "Reformatted?" Hart asked. "I'm not a computer expert. The legal conclusion changed. I relied on counsel. Counsel says he never wrote it." Karen looked toward the altered memorandum but did not touch it. "I would need to review our archives." Hart told her investigators would need access to the computers used to create and distribute the file. Karen objected immediately. "The devices contained confidential homeowner information," she said. "Financial records, personnel material, attorney communications." Hart did not argue. He explained that the office could preserve relevant data voluntarily, or investigators could pursue formal legal process based on what had already been documented. Karen asked for time to speak with counsel. Pierce, standing 10 feet away, said, "I am not advising the association on this matter." That was the first moment Ethan saw Karen's confidence break. Nicole, the former employee, must have misunderstood Pierce's advice and inserted language while preparing a summary for the board. Investigators located Nicole the same day. She had left Cedar Ridge 11 months earlier and now worked for a dental office 2 towns away. Nicole agreed to speak. She remembered the traffic camera program. She remembered Karen insisting the board needed a stronger legal justification before the notices went out. But Nicole denied editing Pierce's memorandum. More importantly, she had kept old work emails because of an employment dispute. One message contained an attachment list from the week the altered file was created. The file name appeared there. The sender was Karen Vance. Hart read the email twice. It did not yet prove who typed the added paragraph. It did prove Karen had distributed the altered document from her account. That should have narrowed the case. Instead, it opened another door. A forensic review of the HOA's bookkeeping records showed a category called Road Safety Reserve. The balance listed there was $86,000. The payment processor reported far more. The $86,000 figure was not false. It was incomplete. Cedar Ridge's general ledger showed a road safety reserve account with a current balance just above $86,000. If investigators had stopped there, Karen could have argued that the entire program was a modest association initiative that had simply accumulated more money than expected. The payment processor destroyed that explanation. RoadSure's portal retained transaction histories by citation number, date, amount, and payment method. Investigators subpoenaed the records and matched them against the notices Ethan had collected. The first surprise was volume. There were thousands of transactions. The second was age. Payments reached back almost 3 years. The third was destination. Not every payment went to the same bank account. RoadSure automatically deducted its processing share, then transferred the HOA portion according to payment instructions supplied by Cedar Ridge. Early deposits went into the Road Safety Reserve. Later deposits were split between that account and another account labeled Community Security Operations. A third stream went through what appeared to be an administrative clearing account before being moved again. Sheriff Hart asked the association treasurer Martin Cole to explain the structure. Martin looked genuinely shaken. He had served on the board for 2 years but said monthly financial packets showed only summarized categories. Automated road safety appeared as one line. Community security appeared as another. "Did you know drivers were being sent notices that looked like traffic citations?" Hart asked. "I knew there were speed cameras. That wasn't the question." Martin stared at the table. "No. Investigators built a spreadsheet of their own. License plate, notice number, capture date, original charge, late fee, payment date, processor deduction, deposit account, transfer destination. As rows accumulated, the story changed from dozens of questionable notices into a financial system. The collected amount passed $100,000, then $200,000, then $400,000. By the time the processor records, bank statements, and archived accounts were reconciled, investigators were tracing close to $600,000 in payments associated with the automated citation program. Not all of that money was sitting in Cedar Ridge accounts. Some had paid vendor fees. Some had been transferred. Some had been spent. Some remained in reserve. The distinction mattered because Hart refused to call the total stolen before investigators established how each dollar had been represented, authorized, and used. But one fact no longer depended on interpretation. Hundreds of people had paid. Ethan scanned the master list and recognized names from the neighborhood, then names he had never seen before. Delivery companies, landscapers, home health workers, repair technicians, visitors from other counties, a veterinarian, a church volunteer, a propane supplier. Many were not Cedar Ridge members. Some had no contractual relationship with the HOA at all. Their only connection to the association was that a vehicle associated with them had passed a camera. That finding widened the case immediately. An HOA might argue about assessments against its own members under covenants. It was much harder to explain why a plumber from another town had received something labeled automated traffic violation and paid $125 into an HOA-controlled system. Ethan found Luis Ortega's payment in the records. Citation number CR 31874, roadsure deduction, 1875s. HOA transfer, 106.25s. The numbers were clean. The authority was not. Then Hart's analyst found something stranger. On several months, the processor totals exceeded the revenue reported in Cedar Ridge's financial packets by tens of thousands of dollars. The missing difference had not vanished. It had moved. Transfers labeled security, consulting, legal reserve, infrastructure administration, and special operations appeared in accounts that most board members said they had never reviewed. Hart requested complete statements. Karen responded by calling an emergency board meeting for that evening. The notice to residents did not mention altered legal documents, outside drivers, processor records, or nearly $600,000 in collected payments. It said only this: emergency meeting, community safety under attack. By 6 o'clock, the clubhouse parking lot was full. Karen had moved faster than the investigation. She sent residents a message saying Ethan was challenging a program that had protected Cedar Ridge from reckless drivers for years. She asked homeowners to attend, bring questions, and defend the board's right to keep neighborhood roads safe. Hart read the email and said nothing for seconds. Then he forwarded it to the investigator handling the financial records. Karen had turned the dispute public before the evidence was finished. Karen stood at the front of the Cedar Ridge clubhouse beneath a projection screen that read, "Keep our rods safe." Every folding chair was taken. Some residents stood along the walls. Others crowded near the doors. Ethan entered quietly with Margaret Bell and sat in the back. Sheriff Hart remained outside with 2 investigators because the meeting itself was not a law enforcement action. Karen began with emotion, not records. "For 3 years, this community has invested in safety," she said. "We have reduced dangerous driving. We have protected seniors. We have protected families. And now one landowner, angry about property boundaries, is attempting to dismantle a system that benefits everyone." A few people applauded. Karen continued. She described speeding vehicles, delivery trucks, and drivers who ignored posted limits. She called Ethan's challenge reckless. She said removing the cameras would send a message that private property mattered more than human safety. What she did not say was traffic citation. She did not say public authority. She did not say collection revenue. She did not say $600,000. Ethan listened. A resident near the front finally asked whether the sheriff's office had told the HOA to stop issuing fines. Karen answered indirectly. "The sheriff is reviewing documents because Mr. Walker filed a complaint." Another resident asked whether the notices were legally enforceable. "Our attorneys reviewed the program." Ethan looked at Margaret. Pierce had already denied that. When Karen opened the floor, Ethan stood. The room quieted. He held no microphone. "I have one question," he said. "What law gives this HOA authority to issue traffic citations to people who are not members?" Karen's face tightened. "We are not going to turn this meeting into a courtroom." "That's fine. Just name the authority." "This is a community safety meeting." "Then show the document." A man in the second row asked Karen to display the legal opinion. She said confidential attorney. Client communications could not be discussed publicly. Another resident asked why contractors had been sent collection warnings. Karen called the examples isolated administrative issues. The mood in the room shifted. Not against her completely, not yet. But the easy applause stopped. Ethan sat down. He did not mention the altered memorandum. Hart had asked him not to disclose evidence that investigators were still preserving. Karen filled the silence by promising a full board review. Then she sent an email before midnight. Subject: Immediate Community Safety Update. The message accused Ethan of attempting to weaken enforcement because he objected to the cameras being placed on his road. It warned residents that dangerous drivers could exploit uncertainty if the program were suspended. It also told staff to preserve all program records. That line would matter. At 1:17 the next morning, the remote server hosting Cedar Ridge's camera archive registered an administrator login. At 1:24, a folder labeled Historical Enforcement was deleted. At 1:31, a second folder containing notice templates was moved to trash. At 1:38, the trash directory was emptied. Roadsure's system automatically logged the actions. The account name was Ciro Edmund 2, the same workstation label found in the metadata of the altered legal opinion. By 8 o'clock, Roadsure had notified investigators because of the preservation request served earlier that week. Hart obtained the server logs. Nobody accused Karen of deleting anything. Not yet. The login could have been used by more than one person. The workstation could have been accessed remotely. Investigators needed to establish who controlled it, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Records had been preserved by request. Hours later, records disappeared. A forensic technician began restoring deleted data from backup snapshots. The first recovered directory contained older notice templates. The second held camera exports. The third was small. Its name was Cochran's Escalation. Inside was a spreadsheet listing unpaid notices, additional charges, referral dates, collection company status, and notes beside individual names. One note read, "Final warning sent." Another read, "ADD to HOA account." A third read, "Access Privalu." Ethan was not in the room when the file opened. Hart was. He studied the first page, then asked the technician to make a forensic copy before anyone clicked another cell. The case had just changed again. The question was no longer only how Cedar Ridge convinced people to pay. Investigators now had to determine what happened to the people who refused, and whether the threat of collection had been merely aggressive language, or part of a deliberate pressure system built to make resistance expensive. The Cochran's escalation file contained 412 names. Investigators began with the easiest records to verify. A second notice had been sent to unpaid recipients after 15 days. It increased the balance and warned that failure to resolve the matter could result in formal collection measures. At 30 days, another letter appeared. That version used red type, "Final Norder." For Cedar Ridge members, the spreadsheet included additional columns that did not exist for outsiders: HOA account status, amenity access, assessment flag, and board review. Margaret Bell's name appeared twice, so did the Parkers. A retired mechanic named Thomas Reed had refused to pay 3 notices. His record carried a note, "Clubhouse access hold." Another homeowner disputed a $175 charge and later found a special administrative assessment on his monthly statement. Sheriff Hart separated those entries from the rest. An HOA could have legitimate authority to charge assessments or restrict certain amenities under its declarations and bylaws. Whether Cedar Ridge had followed those rules was a civil question that required its own review. But tying those powers to something presented as a traffic citation created a different issue. The investigators wanted the paper trail. They found it in authorization forms sent to North Valley Recovery Services, a regional collection agency. North Valley had received batches of unpaid Cedar Ridge accounts for nearly 2 years. The electronic files identified each balance as an association-authorized civil traffic debt. The collection agency's compliance manager, Janice Webb, cooperated immediately after seeing the notices. "We were told these were valid assessments," she said. "Valid under what authority?" Hart asked. "The client certification." She produced the form. At the bottom was a declaration stating that Cedar Ridge had verified each debt, possessed lawful authority to impose the underlying charge, and maintained supporting documentation available upon request. The signature belonged to Karen Vance. The date matched the first large batch of referrals. Hart compared that form with the Roadshare contract and the altered Pierce memorandum. 3 layers now connected on paper. The camera captured the plate. Cedar Ridge generated the notice. North Valley pursued the unpaid balance. At each stage, someone had represented that the underlying charge was authorized. Karen had signed the certification at the collection stage. Investigators still needed to establish what she knew when she signed it. Carelessness, misunderstanding, deceptive representation, and deliberate fraud were not interchangeable conclusions simply because the outcome looked wrong. Hart kept the language precise. He had spent days watching people assume the sheriff would storm the clubhouse and drag Karen away as soon as one document looked suspicious. Hart did the opposite. Every time the case became more dramatic, he slowed it down. "Facts first," he told Ethan. "Labels later." That discipline made each new document harder to dismiss. North Valley suspended all active Cedar Ridge collection files while it reviewed the client certifications. Roadshare placed the camera program on administrative hold. No new notices would be mailed. For the first time in almost 3 years, a driver could pass one of the cameras without a new payment demand being generated. But the collection spreadsheet revealed something else. A column labeled Dife's ID contained codes. Ethan assumed both codes would match the 2 cameras on Walker Road. They did not. He counted 5 unique device numbers. He called Hart. "There are more cameras." Roadshare confirmed the same afternoon that Cedar Ridge's account had 5 active or historical devices. 2 were the units on Ethan's property. One sat near the clubhouse entrance. Another monitored a secondary access road on the east side of the subdivision. The 5th had been relocated twice. Each device fed the same notice system. Each could create balances. Each could send unpaid files into collection. Ethan looked at the map on Hart's conference room screen. Walker Road had felt like the center of the dispute because it crossed his property. It was not the center. It was one capture point in a network. Hart zoomed out. Several device locations sat close to the line separating HOA property from county-maintained roads. If any camera had been positioned beyond Cedar Ridge's actual control, the land issue could repeat. But even if every other pole stood legally on HOA property, the central question remained. Where did the authority come from to turn a photograph into something that looked, behaved, and escalated like a government traffic penalty? Roadsure agreed to deliver its complete back-end records. That meant every device event, every notice, every payment, every configuration change, and every administrator action could be compared with Cedar Ridge's own books. Roadsure delivered the back-end export on a Thursday morning. It arrived on an encrypted drive with a written explanation of the data fields, administrator accounts, device histories, payment mappings, and configuration changes. Sheriff Hart assigned 2 analysts to compare it against Cedar Ridge's bank records and board documents. The 5 device IDs appeared immediately. Camera WR1 was the first unit on Walker Road. WR02 was the second. CR03 sat near the clubhouse. EA04 covered the eastern access. Device M05 had been moved from a service lane near the maintenance building to a point close to the county road boundary. Roadsure's GPS coordinates showed where each unit had been activated. A county surveyor checked the locations. The 2 Walker Road cameras were clearly on Ethan's parcel. The clubhouse camera stood on association property. The eastern unit also appeared to be inside Cedar Ridge. The movable 5th unit was more complicated. One historical location sat within a few feet of the county right-of-way, close enough that investigators requested the original installation photographs before drawing a conclusion. Hart did not need every pole to be illegally placed. The larger issue was that all 5 devices fed one citation engine. The back end showed more than 12,000 recorded speeding events over nearly 3 years. Not every event became a notice. Some plates could not be read. Some events were rejected during review. Some were marked as warnings. Thousands became payment demands. The configuration logs showed that Cedar Ridge administrators could set speed thresholds, notice language, fee tiers, and escalation timing from an online dashboard. Roadsure processed the images, but Cedar Ridge controlled key policy settings. One log entry drew immediate attention. 21 months earlier, the threshold on Walker Road's predecessor location had been lowered. 25 miles per hour became 15. Collections increased the following month. Again, Hart refused to call that proof of intent by itself. A lower limit might have had a safety explanation. Investigators searched board minutes for one. They found none. Then the financial analysts found the mismatch. Roadsure's processor records documented gross payments tied to citation numbers. Cedar Ridge's monthly packets reported smaller figures under automated road safety revenue. The difference did not remain in a single hidden account. Transfers moved through community security operations and an administrative clearing account before appearing under broader categories. One payment purchased upgraded clubhouse surveillance. Another covered a consulting contract. Several paid legal expenses unrelated to traffic cameras. A large amount moved into a reserve used for capital projects. Some expenditures might ultimately have been legitimate HOA spending. That was not the point. The question was whether money collected under the appearance of traffic enforcement had been authorized, accurately reported, and lawfully obtained in the first place. Hart called Martin Cole and 2 other board members back for interviews. All 3 asked for copies of the minutes authorizing citation penalties. Nobody could produce them. Karen insisted the board had approved everything in a meeting held shortly before the program launched. Investigators requested the complete minute book. The relevant meeting existed. So did the vote. But the wording was narrower than Karen had described. The board approved installation of automated security cameras and vehicle monitoring equipment for access control, incident documentation, and community safety analysis. No traffic penalties, no civil citations, no collection program, no revenue sharing arrangement. The next month's minutes contained a brief reference to implementation of road safety procedures, but no motion authorizing fees. The following months showed revenue appearing without a recorded vote creating it. Martin read the pages twice. "I never voted to give us police authority," he said. Hart answered, "No board vote could give you police authority." Martin looked down. That sentence clarified the entire problem. Even if every director had voted yes, a homeowners association could not manufacture governmental power merely by passing a motion. The board minutes mattered for another reason. They showed what the directors had actually been told. Several members appeared to have approved cameras without approving the system later built around them. That made Karen's repeated claim that the board approved everything much harder to sustain. Then the server audit added one more fact. The account that changed notice language from Community Road Safety Notice to Automated Traffic Violation was HOA Etman 2, the same account associated with the altered legal file, the same account used during the overnight deletion. Investigators now had enough overlapping records to ask a judge for authority to seize the original devices and office systems before more data could be changed. Hart prepared an affidavit. This time, the next visit to Cedar Ridge would not be a request. It would be evidence. The warrant was signed Friday at 7:42 in the morning. By 9, 3 sheriff's vehicles were parked outside the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. Sheriff Hart walked to the front door with the warrant in one hand and a body camera recording on his vest. Karen opened the door. "You brought him here?" Hart did not answer the accusation. He handed her the warrant. "We are executing a court-authorized search of the association office, designated computer systems, financial records, camera control records, and materials related to the automated citation program." Karen read the first page. "This is unnecessary. You can contact counsel. We offered to cooperate. Then this should be straightforward." A digital evidence technician photographed the office computers before touching them. Power connections were recorded. Serial numbers were written down. Storage devices were labeled. External drives went into evidence bags. Ledger books were photographed in place before being removed. At the same time, deputies went to Walker Road and the other camera locations. They did not rip the equipment from the poles. They photographed each device, documented orientation and GPS position, disconnected power under Roadsure's instructions, and tagged the control hardware for evidence. Ethan watched the nearest camera go dark. Inside the clubhouse, investigators found printed notice batches, returned mail, collection correspondence, bank statements, processor summaries, and board packets. Then one deputy opened a storage room cabinet and found a locked steel safe. Karen immediately said it contained dues, petty cash, and event deposits. Hart asked for the key. She said the treasurer had it. Martin Cole, standing in the hallway with another board member, shook his head. "I don't." Karen said there must be a spare in the office. Investigators searched the authorized locations and found one in a desk organizer beneath a folder of deposit slips. "There is nothing unusual in that safe." Hart inserted the key. The lock turned. Inside were envelopes arranged in vertical stacks, 2 cash bags, cashier's checks, receipt books, and several binders. The first binder was labeled Road Safety Payments. The second was Outstanding Citations. The third contained handwritten reconciliation sheets. Hart removed one envelope and read its reference number. An analyst searched the processor export, match. A second envelope, match. A cashier's check, match. The serial format tied the physical records directly to entries in the citation database. Karen stepped forward. "Those are association funds." Hart looked at her. "Some may be. They are dues and assessments." The analyst opened another binder. "No," she said. "These are citation payment reconciliations." Karen's expression hardened. "You are deliberately mischaracterizing our records." Hart picked up one of the newest notices from the file. Across the top were the words Cedar Ridge Traffic Enforcement Division. He placed it beside a payment envelope carrying the same citation number. Then he looked at Karen. "An HOA is not a traffic court." It was the sentence Ethan would remember because Hart did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The evidence had reached the point where volume replaced argument. Investigators counted cash and negotiable instruments under camera. They photographed every bundle before moving it. They separated ordinary HOA receipts from payments tied to citation numbers. The safe did not contain the entire $600,000. It contained a portion of the money, plus the records needed to trace the rest. Bank statements and processor data showed that nearly $600,000 had moved through the program over its life. Some remained in association-controlled accounts. Some had gone to Roadsure under the service agreement. Some had been transferred into reserves. Some had funded expenses. Some required additional tracing. Hart was careful with the number. He did not say $600,000 had been sitting in cash. He said investigators had identified approximately $600,000 in collections connected to the citation system. That distinction made the findings stronger, not weaker. It could be documented. Karen sat in a conference room chair while investigators finished cataloging the office. For the first time since Ethan had challenged the cameras, she stopped talking about reckless drivers. She asked what would happen next. Hart told her evidence would be reviewed, affected accounts would be identified, prosecutors would determine appropriate charges, if supported, and the association would be required to preserve remaining records. "So you're arresting me?" "I didn't say that." Karen stared at him. Hart had done the same thing throughout the investigation. He refused to give anyone a conclusion before the records justified it. But when Karen looked through the glass wall toward the open safe, the altered memorandum on the evidence table, and the boxes of payment notices being sealed, she finally understood what had changed. The story was no longer hers to explain. It belonged to the evidence. The cameras remained dark. Over the following weeks, investigators and association counsel worked through the payment records one account at a time. Drivers whose charges had no lawful basis were identified from RoadSure's archive, bank records, and collection files. Active collection referrals were withdrawn. Refund procedures began under court supervision, and the association's insurers were notified. The altered legal memorandum became part of the evidence file. So did the server logs, Karen's collection certifications, the board minutes, and the financial transfers. Responsibility was separated by document, date, signature, and access record rather than by rumor. Karen resigned as HOA president before the review was complete. Prosecutors later announced charges supported by the evidence they believed they could prove. Other board members were treated according to what records showed they had actually known and approved. Some had voted for security cameras. That did not mean they had voted for fake governmental authority. RoadSure revised its procedures for private association clients and cooperated with the repayment process. North Valley closed the disputed collection accounts. On Walker Road, the poles were finally removed after investigators released them from evidence. Ethan watched a crew lift the first one from the ground and fill the hole beside the ditch. No celebration followed. There was simply an empty stretch of road again. Margaret Bell received a letter confirming the cancellation of her remaining disputed balance and the repayment process for the notices she had paid. Luis Ortega got his $125 back. Dale Fisher called Ethan to say his crews would take Cedar Ridge jobs again. The old 25-mile-per-hour advisory sign returned near the entrance, this time placed by Ethan on his own property. Months later, people still talked about the amount. Nearly $600,000 collected through a system that had grown quietly because most individual payments were small enough to surrender without a fight. But Ethan remembered something else. The system had depended on appearance, a shield, a citation number, a deadline, a warning. A letter that looked official enough to make ordinary people assume somebody, somewhere, must have checked whether it was legal. That assumption was the real source of power. Karen had talked about safety, authority, and the board. Ethan had answered with a deed. Hart had answered with records. Pierce had answered with the original memorandum. The payment processor answered with transactions. The server answered with logs. In the end, no single angry confrontation broke the system. Verification did. A piece of paper can look official and still have no authority behind it. A board can vote and still remain inside the limits of the law. A camera can record a number without creating the power to punish someone for it. And a private road can reveal how far an institution has gone once somebody asks the simplest question: who gave you the right to do this?